I don't even remember there was a rationale. It was pretty quickly.
We don't like it.
Yeah, it was just, we don't like it, we're not interested. I know some reporting has asked the governor's energy office whether they'll consider nuclear, and they're pretty dismissive as well. They don't say we don't like it, but they're like, we have wind and solar. We'll be all right. That's essentially the attitude in the state level.
The happiest day of the year is when the Colorado legislative session ends. Thank God it's over. To take a look at a few of these things that have happened from the Independence Institute, Jake Fogleman, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, John. Happy to be here.
All right, so you work on a lot of energy issues, so let's just jump on that one. I know that gasoline's a little expensive lately. Fortunately, the legislature is going to take care of that. We'll be fine. And I also understand that we want to fight climate change, which also costs nothing. So we'll be fine. What passed? What didn't?
Yeah, so it was a busy session in energy again, as it has been the last few years. If I could sum it up in one word, here's a good SAT word for you: duplicity. Because they came out touting, affordability governor. Everything's about fee relief. We're going to save money on the cost of living. And what do? They pass a green codes mandate on all home building across the state that is, if the analysis is to be believed, is going to add 5 figures, possibly more, to the cost of building new homes in the state, which, that's great for affordability.
Colorado is one of the most expensive places to buy a home.
That's right.
It's insane. Poor young people
like me
can't afford to get into a starter home. And the affordability governor keeps saying, well, we're going to do great things. They want to make a permanent class of renters who can never own. What does this code do? Because it ties a little bit into what's keeping people in Louisville and Superior from being able to rebuild their homes too. What does this code do?
That's exactly right. If you've been following the Marshall Fire fiasco at all, you're probably familiar with these codes. The 2021 IECC codes, I'll try not to get too wonky.
IECC?
Yeah, the International Energy Conservation Code. It's essentially this unelected international board that produces model codes for buildings and blah, 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 blah. Anyways, the leaders in Louisville decided to adopt these codes before anyone else in the state. And sure enough, a massive fire happens and 500 homes are destroyed. So these poor folks that just lost everything are looking to rebuild their lives. Come to find out, it's going to cost them so much more to rebuild under these new standards that they never had to deal with when they moved into these homes in the first place. And many of them don't have the insurance to cover it or the bank to cover it.
The mayor of Louisville was so progressive in this and wanted to be such the great climate warrior.
That's right.
She didn't just even take the recommendations. She went to the net zero emissions recommendations, which meant if you're building a new home, charging stations for your Teslas, no natural gas, which means no natural gas fireplace, no natural gas stove, no natural gas water heater, no natural gas heater, all to be electrified to the delight of Xcel Energy.
Sure.
But it's wildly expensive. We had some architects say it will cost $100,000 more to rebuild that home to these new standards.
Well, that's right. You got to think a lot of these homes were built, in the 90s? There was no 2021 IECC code. There was no on-site solar mandates for their homes back then. So they're suddenly being brought up to this most stringent standard that exists right now. And sure enough, the state legislature thought, wow, that experience they had in Louisville, this seems like an awful good idea to bring to everybody across the state.
Let's help with affordability. And it's not like if you want to retrofit your home, or if you want to buy a home with all $100,000 new add-ons to it, that I want to stop you. Sure. I don't. But you can't look at voters and taxpayers and say, we're making life more affordable for you by adding $100,000 to the cost of a house, even if you can find a place to build because of all of our growth controls in these liberal municipalities like Boulder and most of the Denver metro area.
That's right.
Because we care.
That's right, yeah.
So did it pass?
It did pass, yes, it did. There was a lot of it was a close call. It barely passed the House the first time around. And interest groups got in there and got
barely passed the House?
The first time around, yeah.
That's
by one vote.
That says a lot because it is a wildly progressively controlled House. There's a huge margin between R's and D's in the House.
Right.
and only by one vote.
Yeah, a lot of them, the word from the reporting was that they got kind of skittish about the affordability.
Oh, really?
How could you tout yourself as affordability if we're passing on these big, expensive code mandates?
Oh, we're saving the planet.
Right.
Screw working people, we're saving the planet.
Well, I guess the folks in the close districts weren't really buying that first go-around. And then several amendments came in to add these conciliatory advisory boards that aren't going to really do much to the legislation, but it bought off the votes, and then it passed again with flying colors on party line votes. So.
Did any Republicans vote for these?
Mr. Priola did in the Senate.
No, I'm sorry. I said, did any Republicans vote for these?
No Republicans.
By the way, you're young. You don't get this, but there's always been a Kevin Priola in the Republican Party. Always. And Republicans think they get a majority, and it's Mickle John or somebody else. And there's always this guy who's a Democrat, a raging Democrat, but somehow put an R behind his name, and it's delightful.
It is. Yeah, he was behind a lot of the climate bills this session, actually. So, yeah.
Because he cares about affordability.
Yeah, he sure
as
does.
Well. All right, what else on the energy front?
Well, there was an interesting development where Republicans actually got in the mix. They were unfortunately shot down by our supposedly climate crisis concerned Democrats. But Senator Bob Rankin was very interested in introducing a study for the state of Colorado to explore small modular reactor nuclear technology.
What is small modular reactor?
So it's actually really exciting technology. When you think nuclear, a lot of people think the big smokestacks from the 70s,
right.
Yeah, Chernobyl. But this is actually really innovative. The last 2 decades, a lot of these firms have basically took those plants, brought them down to a much smaller scale. So they're safer, they're cheaper to build. You can scale them up as needed. They integrate into existing coal infrastructure a lot of the time. So if you're retiring a coal plant and these folks need...
You keep going like this. I'm imagining something the size of a suitcase. Well, here's your nuclear power plant. We're not talking that.
They do have microreactors that they're not quite suitcase size, but they are pretty small. It's really impressive what they've been able to do with this technology. But many people think that this is the wave of the future because nuclear power runs 24 hours a day. It produces 0 carbon. And if we want to meet our carbon goals, the ambitious carbon goals that the state has.
This is what gets me. So help me understand.
Sure.
If the left wants to decarbonize, if they want to get rid of carbon, it cannot be done unless there is a pretty sizable switch to nuclear power. There's just not enough windmills to build. There's not enough sunny days. There's not enough rare earth minerals to build the solar panels needed to go completely carbon free. So either we choke down society to the point where we're rubbing sticks together for warmth, which, by the way, will cause more carbon release than nuclear, or we start embracing nuclear power. And some progressives who know how to do math are actually saying, listen, if this is truly a crisis, this is what we're going to have to do. So what would this bill have done?
So this was just a study. I think it appropriated maybe $500,000, so not in the grand scheme of things.
$500,000 while we have billions of surplus funds.
That's right. The biggest budget that's ever been proposed, yeah.
Right.
We're just going to be a study that the state was going to conduct to say, hey, would this technology work here? Could we possibly integrate it into our grid going forward? And right away, it got sent to a kill committee. The Democrats weren't having any of that, and it died almost immediately, which is, as you pointed out, pretty sad because you have even the Biden administration, his Secretary of Energy says nuclear energy is an indispensable asset to our future. You have Republicans that are getting on board. Obviously, Rankin was backing this bill. So you have this bipartisan consensus that this technology is necessary. So they kill it.
What's interesting is study fever. We've had governors who like to do blue ribbon commissions.
Sure.
Yeah, and so it's another word for study, which is we're not saying no, we're not saying yes. We're going to kick it to another legislative session after an election. And so we'll just do studies. And it's the safe thing to do.
Right.
Even this, they couldn't do. Why? What was their objection?
I don't even remember there was a rationale. It was pretty quickly.
We don't like it.
Yeah, it was just, we don't like it, we're not interested. I know some reporting has asked the governor's energy office whether they'll consider nuclear, and they're pretty dismissive as well. They don't say we don't like it, but they're like, we have wind and solar. We'll be all right. That's essentially the attitude in the state level.
There's not enough. There will never be enough.
Right. Well, even if you eminent domain everyone out of their house and build utility scale wind and solar all over the state.
They model it in such a way that, if we pack and stack people and they all live in, one-bedroom apartments on top of each other, and we have wind power and, no, it doesn't work.
Right. Sometimes the wind doesn't blow. Sometimes the sun doesn't shine. And then what do you do?
So are these nuclear power packs? I like that idea. I want to put one in. Can I put one under my hood in my car?
Maybe someday. Right. It's not that far-fetched.
Why are they cheaper? Why are they better?
Well, it's just a matter of scale because they're small and they're modular, so they can be, it's basically a factory, just produce, plant. That's the big drawback of traditional nuclear reactors is that a lot of times they can turn into boondoggles where, we'll say it's going to cost $6 billion, but by the end of the project it's $12 billion and it's 10 years over, the project.
And a nuke factory has to be built on site. These reactors get built in a factory.
Right, and can be delivered by truck
and shipped.
Plug and play, yeah.
Is it being used anywhere, or is this just fantasy?
So they're in development in several states, Mountain West states no less. The small town of Kemmerer, Wyoming is a big coal town. They're seeing the writing on the wall that coal's kind of going away. And they've invested heavily into becoming a new nuclear site. The state of Utah is exploring it. The state of Idaho is exploring this technology. A lot of our allies in Europe right now suddenly confronted with the reality that, hey, maybe we should look into some energy independence. They're also pursuing this technology. So this is really the wave of the future, I think. And it's, I think, a little short-sighted that our Democratic representatives just didn't give it a fair shake. But I think it'll come back in the future.
I don't see how it stops.
Yeah.
Especially as utility bills go up. Anything else on the energy front?
Yeah, well, just one more that didn't end up making it through, but I think will come back. State Senator Chris Hansen, always behind a lot of these climate bills. He tried to pass a big behemoth climate bill that, among other things, would have banned all gas-powered lawn equipment. So no more lawnmowers.
No more lawnmowers.
And I think someone got his ear and said, hey, buddy, this is an election year.
It's an election year. Well, would it get rid of, is it what they're trying to do in California, where it's gas-powered tools?
Yes.
So in other words, guys who take down trees for a living are going to have to go back to the old, two guys on a saw, that's how.
They have no gas chainsaws, no gas lawnmowers, no weed whackers, none of that. All electric was going to be in the proposal.
Which you can use those electric things depending if you can afford it.
Sure.
But you cannot do it in any industrial scale.
That's right.
You cannot be in the logging industry and not have chainsaws.
That's right.
You cannot be in the lawn mowing or industry without that. There are guys out there who do landscaping. They need that. The guy who's once a week mows his lawn, all right. But even then, what I find so very insulting is we will force you, we will coerce you, instead of what I thought intelligent people did, which is, hey, I want to convince you to buy this electric lawnmower than this one. The intolerance of our legislature, the absolute intolerance of different lifestyles is clear. Duplicity, I think, is the right word. Let me try it a different way. I've never seen such a hubris at the Capitol in all my many decades. Anything we ought to be looking out for next year?
Yeah, I would look for that bill to come back. He actually gave a statement to the media saying, hey, we didn't get this done, but I will introduce this bill. I'll do it early so it can't be held up at the last-minute flurry. So take a look for that.
By the last-minute flurry, I love the last-minute flurry,
by the way. Such a self-inflicted wound.
It is, and they did this last year. So for those who don't get it, the party in charge controls the schedule of the legislative body. And if they do not have discipline to get bills through, then there's a log jam towards the end. And you do this because you've allowed too many late bills.
Right.
When you think about it, every legislator is allowed 5 bills. That should be 500 bills. But there was 750 bills or something. So those are all late bills. And they didn't manage the calendar,
right,
which stopped many of their big reforms, as it did last year. And what I love is that we're supposed to believe that these social engineers will be able to somehow manage our lives, manage our transportation, our health care, our energy, when they can't even manage their own calendar to get their own bills through.
That's exactly right.
Jake, thanks for keeping an eye on it all.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.